2-3, deductive reasoning. The law of detachment. If P, then Q, and that's a true statement, and you also find out that P is true, if this part right here is true, then automatically you're allowed to say that the conclusion, the Q, is true as well. Okay, so in your note, this is in your test booklet, you should have that written down. This is in your notes right here. Copy this down. A law of logic. If P implies Q is a true statement and P is true, then you are allowed to say that Q is true. Okay? Copy this example down. Here's the first argument. If two numbers are odd, then their sum is even. That's if P, then Q. The hypothesis is that two numbers are odd. So odd really is representing the hypothesis. Then their sum is even. That's the conclusion. Okay? So in order for the law of detachment to work, we need to know that the hypothesis is true. We need to pull apart the P and the Q. So if it's true to say that these two numbers are odd, if P is true, then think about it. What would the law of detachment say? What are you allowed to conclude about 3 and 5? If two numbers are odd, then their sum is even. Well, if 3 and 5 are odd, then the sum of 3 and 5 will be even. The sum of 3 and 5 is even. And that's the statement Q, and that's true. Okay, law of syllogism. If P implies Q and Q implies R, if these are all true statements, then you can just follow down the chain and say, well, if P is true, then what must be true at the end? R must be true. So they say then P implies R is also a true statement. So in your notes, copy this down now. Law of syllogism, sometimes called the chain rule, is a law of logic. If P implies Q and Q implies R are true statements, then the statement P implies R is a true statement. This top one is from your test booklet. Make sure you write that in. This one is in your notes. So let's copy down an example here. We need 3 if-then statements in order for the law of syllogism to apply. So if you like the angels, then you will get an A. Just kidding. Okay, but that's if P, then Q. Now, in order for the law of syllogism or the chain rule to work, the same ending has to be used at the beginning of the next statement. So the next statement has to say if you will get an A. If you get an A, then you will be happy. So now look at that entire argument after you've copied it down. If you like the angels, then you'll get an A. If you get an A, then you'll be happy. What is the end result of the rules then? In other words, what can we eliminate here? Cross out the middleman. If you like the angels, then you will get an A. If you get an A, that's repetitious, so let's cross that out. If you get an A, if you get an A, and let's look at what's left over. If you like the angels, then you will be happy. That's the conclusion you can make. If the first part is true, then the end of your argument can be true as well. All right, a couple examples to look at before you get to class tomorrow. Use the law of syllogism or the chain rule. Okay, if you are a clown, then you wear big shoes. If you wear big shoes, then your feet hurt. So think about what the end result is going to be here. If you are a clown, what's the end result going to be? Well, let's cut out what's repetitious here. Wearing big shoes and wearing big shoes, that's at the end of one and the beginning of the next, so we can cross those out. So look at what's left. If you are a clown, then your feet hurt. That's the conclusion that you can make. Determine if each conjecture is valid by the law of detachment. The law that we're trying to use or analyze right now is that if P, then Q is a true statement, and if we know or detach away the P, the hypothesis, and if we know that P is true, those are the things we're looking for right here, then we're allowed to say that Q is true as well. So let's look if we have that here. If measure of angle ABC equals the measure of angle CBD, then BC bisects angle ABD. Okay, so our hypothesis is right here. Hypothesis in pink, conclusion in green. This is our hypothesis. This is our conclusion. Okay, now in order for the law to work, we have to detach the P away first. So is that working here? If P, then Q. Look at what the next statement is. The next statement is about bisecting. Does that go with the P or does that go with the Q? That is the conclusion. That's going with the Q. So this argument is not going to work. Okay, you can't start off knowing that Q is true and then go backwards through the arrow. We have to know that P is true and we need to follow the order of the arrow. So this one is invalid. It's not valid argument because we don't know that the hypothesis is true. Let's try number 2. If a student is in 10th grade, then the student may participate in student council. So let's make the hypothesis in pink so you can see it. A student is in 10th grade. That's the condition. Then the student may participate in student council, and that is the conclusion. We'll put that one in green and we'll call that Q. Now in order for our law of detachment to work, we have to pull out and detach the P. We have to know that first, and then we'll follow the direction of the arrow to the Q. So if a student is in 10th grade, then the student may participate in student council. Look at the very next statement. Eric is in 10th grade. Does that go with the P or does that go with the Q? That is the hypothesis. The hypothesis was about being in 10th grade. So what we have here is the hypothesis is true, just like this. So therefore, you're allowed to follow the arrow and conclude that Q will be true as well. So we should be able to say that Eric may participate in student council. Eric may participate in student council. That is true, which makes it a valid argument. Okay, so anytime you know the hypothesis is true, you're told that as part of your argument, then you're allowed to conclude that the conclusion is true as well, that Q is true. All right, the last 2 examples we're going to look at right here are following the law of syllogism. In order for the law of syllogism to work, we have to know if P, then Q. We have to know that's true. And we also have to know if Q, then another statement like R is true. Okay, we have to know these 2 things. And if that's true, if the middle argument right there is the same, then you're allowed to say if P, then R, from the beginning to the end. All right, so we're going to need 3 colors here. Let's look at this argument. If a triangle is isosceles, okay, that's the hypothesis. If a triangle is isosceles, then the conclusion is then it has 2 congruent sides. Okay. If a triangle is isosceles and it has 2 congruent sides, sounds reasonable. Now read the next sentence. If a triangle has 2 congruent angles, then it has 2 congruent sides. Okay, so this statement right here matches right here. It's 2 congruent sides. And having congruent angles is completely different. So I'll do that in a different color. Make that one blue. Okay, if a triangle has 2 congruent angles, it doesn't match with anything. In order for the law of syllogism to work, the 2 middle arguments have to be exactly the same. So this one says if P then Q, but then it says if R then Q, and that doesn't work because Q is at the end of both of them. That's invalid. In order to be valid, the 2 middle ones have to match perfectly. So let's look at the last one. If the gossip said it, it must be true. That is the hypothesis. The gossip said it. Conclusion is, then it must be true. Okay, look at the next one. If it is true, that's the exact same as the conclusion here, then somebody is in big trouble. So what we have here is, if the gossip said it, then it must be true. The next statement matches. If it is true, then somebody is in big trouble. We'll call that R. If P then Q, if Q then R, then you're allowed to say that if the gossip said it, then somebody's in big trouble. Unfortunately, this sentence is kind of written backwards, but remember the word because is a condition. Because something happens, then something else will happen. Okay, so really it's saying that if the gossip said it, then somebody's in big trouble. I just rewrote that in the right order. Because the gossip said it, then somebody's in big trouble, and that's true. Because the gossip said it, then somebody's in big trouble, so that one's valid. I know that this is confusing, especially at first. We're going to take another day on it to make sure that you understand it and to help you with it. But make sure that you have these notes copied down and that you've watched the example so that you have a really good idea going into tomorrow.